Good evening and welcome to yet another employment conversation between the two of us. I'm Shalom, Klein, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my partner in crime, Andrea Storz.
Hi.
And we are here for yet another session of employment. Today we are going to talk, continuing really our conversation from the last time around interviewing, but today we are going to get more into the nuts and bolts of the actual interviewing conversation. We talked in the past, and if you didn't see it, make sure you check out the conversation where we talked about how to dress, showing up early in a period of COVID, of Zoom rooms, and so on. So lots of really important topics. We covered a lot of those fundamentals, but today we're going to spend a little bit of time. We're going to make this short, sweet, and to the point. In the Army, we call it bluff, bottom line up front. So that's the logical. You never heard that, Andrea?
I like that. Great.
You know what? Sometimes I could even teach the teacher. There we go.
Hardly.
Oh, yeah. So today we're going to get into it. Andrea, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. We're seeing a lot of people who are facing a lot of struggles, all different types of struggles. And a lot of it is in really knowing how to handle the interview process. It's not so easy during these times, and we're hoping that tonight will answer some questions.
Yeah, that's great. Well, these I know have been very helpful to a lot of people, and hopefully if you're tuning in, you have found it helpful. The best thing that you can do is to pass it on, tell somebody else about this, share the link. Because a lot of this information is indeed timeless, and obviously we're sharing this information because we know so many people have been affected because of COVID-19. But really, this information is timeless, and there are so many new realities that we are facing. So, with that said, let's jump right into it. And Andrea, you, as you sort of just alluded to, you are getting many calls all the time from folks that are struggling. And so we've talked in the past about preparing your resume, preparing your cover letter. So you've gone through all of those steps. So the first thing that I can say is congratulations. You've made it pretty far along in the process. If you're getting an interview, that's huge. That's awesome. And if you're just listening to this because you want to be proactive and you want to be prepared for when you get to that interview, that's great, because you will get to that interview. You will be successful. And the key is first impressions matter. And, generally speaking, you've got one shot. Hopefully there will be a second interview, maybe even a third interview and so on. But that first interview, Andrea, isn't that the most impactful?
Well, it is. First impressions are lasting impressions, no matter what anyone tells you. I mean, let's say you get this job, and when you first came on the job, people thought you were standoffish, or people thought that you didn't want to engage in any type of conversation. And 5 years down the road, they'll say, it's amazing what I first thought of you. When you got here, you're such a different person. But the point is, they remember their first impression of you. So keep that in mind. The other thing I really want to bring up, and this is a very difficult subject, but I think it needs to be at the very least touched on. A lot of us are dealing with fear, with anger, with depression, with all different types of emotions that tend to overtake us sometimes. And people think, well, I'm not going to let that show in an interview. Sometimes it's very difficult not to let that show in an interview. And the truth is, you got to find your own way of pumping yourself up before you sit down to talk to someone in an interview situation. If you find yourself all of a sudden getting angry because of the salary that's being offered, you're going to blow it. You're going to blow it. And by the way, I've seen that in pre-COVID times. And especially now when people are facing so many emotional struggles, I know it's easier said than done. You gotta try and keep things under control. So, that's actually a whole topic unto itself. But, what Shalom said is correct. Congrats to anybody who is getting offers for an interview. And yes, it's a one-shot deal in many ways, but you can't let that paralyze you. You have to look at this with an enthusiasm, with an excitement, and with a confidence, but you also have to keep it under control. When people get nervous, they tend to oversell themselves. Bad idea. Listen more, speak less. It's not about you, it's about them. So keep that in your head when you're speaking to someone, especially, by the way, on Zoom. It's kind of a funky way of being interviewed. You have to really pay attention, take your cues, really look at the person that you're speaking to on Zoom. Don't kind of like look at the picture of your family that's over there, or look at your dog who happens to be destroying your shoe over there. You really have to be in a room that doesn't have anything to be focused on other than the person you're speaking to. Always have your resume nearby, because, believe it or not, out of nervousness, out of anxiety, out of fear, whatever it may be, sometimes we forget certain things that are important regarding our career. So these are just small tips. Also, I think one of the most important things, do your research. Do your research on the company that you're going to be interviewing with. Find out what their culture is. Because if you can kind of let the interviewer know that you are a strong fit for the culture, that's almost, if not more important than the skill set. Many times the skill set can be learned on the job. The culture as a whole, it's either a fit or it's not. It's pretty black and white. So make sure you know who you're speaking to, what the company does. Make sure that you ask questions. When they say, okay, we're done. Do you have any questions? Yeah, I do. Don't sit there and go, no, I don't think so.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So that will inevitably come up, that question. Absolutely. Towards the end, and that's basically your cue that you're almost done. But when that happens, so you don't say that's something you can prepare for. So what is an appropriate question? You're in your first interview. Is it appropriate to say, okay, how much am I going to be making, and how many days vacation, and will I be able to take a 3-hour lunch break so I could visit my kids in school? Is that an appropriate question for that first interview?
Okay, so everything
I was being facetious, just by the way.
Of course. Everything that you've just mentioned, which by the way, people actually do.
Oh, I'm saying it for a reason. I've heard from employers that have heard that question, like, what the heck?
You have to be careful in the questions you ask. Shalom is being very direct, and I think that's the way to attack this. You don't talk about salary or perks or anything. That's like down the line. That has nothing to do with your first introduction. It just doesn't. It's like if you went on a date and the guy says to you, would you like to meet my parents next week? I would be so freaked out and think the guy's a lunatic and I'm out of here. So the same kind of reaction can definitely apply to a hiring manager who's listening to you talk about things that really have nothing to do with the job. So, an appropriate question would be, and again, it all depends on the situation. Why is
Yeah.
this position available? The biggie is, what's a typical day? I mean, that is something that you see online. It's a template question. And anyone who is used to interviewing or hiring knows that you're kind of parroting a template to make yourself look good. So after you've done your research on the company that you are interviewing with, mark down things that you find kind of interesting. I see that you have 385 employees. How did it get to be that size? I know you started much smaller. Was it that you needed it? Was it that people kept coming to you, wanting to work for you? The questions need to be about them, not about you. Oops, sorry. Not about you.
Okay,
That's
so let's say somebody followed our advice well, they came prepared, they actually legit do have questions. Is that the time to pull out your double-sided sheet and start asking, the full litany of questions? Or, do you get one question, two questions? The employer said, hey, do you have any questions? They said it plural. Is that okay?
A great point. That's actually a great point.
You sound surprised.
What I suggest, never surprised. What I suggest is when a hiring manager or whoever is interviewing you says, "Do you have any questions?" There are very strategic ways to answer that. One is, I actually do have one or two questions. Ask those one or two and say, you know what? This has been a great interview, and I really want to digest what I've just heard. If you don't mind, if I do have any future questions, I'd like to put them in an email to you. First of all, that establishes a second contact. And it also shows that you took the time to kind of digest what you were listening to. And also, by the way, this is shtick, but it works. Most people do not know how to interview well. That's just a fact of life. But one thing you can do is draw attention to the interviewer saying, as a result of the incredible information you shared with me, it opened up my eyes and motivated me to think of the following questions. So you're making it about the person who has asked you, do you have any questions? You are stroking them. You are showing that you've taken the necessary time to digest what they have shared with you. You come off together. Of course, you don't want to be in their face about stuff. It's a matter of balance. And that's the truth throughout any interview. And the one thing I will say about an interview, and Shalom, you and I have talked about this endless times, it should be a conversation, not an interrogation, not a firing squad, not a question, answer. It's not a tennis match. It truly has to blend into a conversation. The primary reason being you want to show you're listening and that your ability to communicate is strong. Because without communication, I don't care what your job is, without strong communication, you're done. Kind of makes sense? I think that it's an important point.
Absolutely. And I love that idea of opening up the door to follow-up communication. You're basically asking essentially permission to follow up, they will say yes, and you can then wow them with your follow through skills.
Right.
Both your written communication, sending not a, just thrown together like, hey, I got 2 Qs and smiley face. Like, by the way, what I'm saying is what not to do. I just want to make it crystal clear. That is what not to do.
No LOLs, by the way.
No LOLs. Well, you know what? It's good that we're saying it because you know what? Leave nothing to the imagination. So absolutely no. That follow through is certainly important. And in terms of, we talked about this in our other discussion in terms of on Zoom and so on. So there's, you may have brought this up, and I'm trying to recall. Are there different etiquette? You talked about having no distractions in the room. You talked about what to have your resume. Is it okay to sip on a glass of water while you're sitting in front of your computer?
It depends how clumsy you are.
Oh.
And it also depends if you dribble while you drink. And I'm not kidding, because if you're afraid you're going to spill something, if you're afraid you know how waiters come up to you in the good old days when you were actually in a restaurant and a waiter came up to you while you are chewing your food, saying everything okay, and you go, mm-hmm. You don't want to do that on an interview. So the timing of taking a drink of water has to be kind of perfect. So that's a personal choice. Some people get, very dry and they need it. Some people are on medications where they're very nervous that they will get dry. Just be smart about it. Take a sip, put it down. Don't leave it in the window of the Zoom, by the way. The one thing I really wanted to bring up, Shalom, is, many clients come to me and say, oh my God, the interview was amazing. We know so many people in common and, we talked about so much stuff. That is not necessarily a good thing. If you happen to say, oh my God, you know Joanne Smith? I know Joanne Smith. I love her. She's a very close friend. Well, the interviewer happens to hate Joanne Smith. How are you going to cover that? You're not. So it's one thing to have informal conversation to a point. If you feel it's getting away, take a little bit of control and bring it back to a professional interview. You guys are going to think I'm nuts, but if you say to someone, I am a Sox fan, and the person you're talking to is a Cubs fan, there are enough people out there who are extremists who will say, a Sox fan cannot work here. It's never going to work. I know that's an extreme, and I know it may sound ridiculous. I've heard more ridiculous things in my life. So be careful what you choose to speak about informally. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. That's interesting. And in terms of formality, when you're jumping on and you're having a decent conversation, you feel sort of at ease. Is it okay to immediately jump to first name basis? Or do you call somebody sir, ma'am, Mr.? Well, how does that work?
Okay, so here's the deal with that. That's okay. When someone calls me ma'am, my skin crawls and I want to slap them.
Good thing you're not in the Army.
But that, I know, right? Well, that's a whole different ball game. But, when you have customer service reps and they're getting annoyed with you and they're going, ma'am, it's just annoying. The best thing you can do always is Mr. Klein, and let the person say, Please call me Shalom. Then you've been given permission. It's all okay. I tend to err on the side of being more formal, just because you can't go wrong. You just can't go wrong.
Sure.
And in terms, they're going to call you by your first name. So it seems a little imbalanced, but, like I've always noticed in hospitals, nurses call Dr. Smith and Dr. Smith call nurses by their first name. It bothers me, but that's just the protocol. I don't agree with it, but that's something to keep in your mind as an example that sometimes formality is more welcomed than not. So wait until you're told what direction to go into.
Yeah, that's super helpful. In terms of the content, especially because, again, most of these conversations are taking place virtually. I'm even noticing in our conversation, we don't have that in-person sort of social cues. Is
Right.
it normal to say, okay, yeah, every once in a while, just to basically make sure they know that the connection is still alive and that you haven't lost it?
Yeah. It's always a good thing to acknowledge that you're hearing what is being said. If, let's say, the camera goes dead, but the audio's still there, that's a problem. And you will have to rely on the audio to say things like, I understand, or that's interesting. Or if you're asked a question and you can't come up with that answer as quickly as you'd like, stall tactics. That's a really good question. I've not been asked that before. Or give me a moment because I have a few examples and I want to pick the one I think would make the most sense for you. So, by the way, get ready for behavioral questions. Those are questions like, let's say you're going to customer service. So a question would be something like, how would you handle a client that jumps over the counter, which is not going to happen anymore, and starts screaming in your face? You better have an answer. That type of thing you better have an answer for, because that's an extreme situation that if you don't know how to handle, you're not getting the job. Okay? So you have to come up with your own stories that you commit to memory so that when someone says, how have you dealt with staff that has been out of control?
Mm-hmm.
You should have at least 2 stories ready to go. So I'm not saying that you answer the second the interviewer is done. Take that cleansing breath before you answer. By the way, there is something called Lamaze, which women use primarily during delivery of babies. It never worked for me, by the way, but I use it now in my everyday life, and it's fantastic. And it's taking a cleansing breath, clearing your head, putting the focus. So you gotta kind of listen to your body a little bit. If you feel that you're so tense that your shoulders are starting to hurt, you're not going to go, but you are very slowly going to kind of relax, and that will come out in your voice. Everything affects everything else. It's all connect the dots. And Zoom, while I love Zoom and I'm very comfortable on Zoom, a lot of people are not. They prefer that kind of professional environment where they get jazzed and so you have to make it work for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And really, the last question that I have is really, you mentioned the behavior questions and the scenario questions, or what I would call the gotcha questions.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to do it, but a lot of companies, it almost has become a thing that it's like, even a small company, even that doesn't necessarily even know why they're doing it, they do it because they want to and they want to see your reaction. So is there preparation that somebody can do in advance? What's appropriate to say, do? What's your advice on that?
So there are a couple of questions that may not come up directly, but the prep has to be done for anything leading to it. For example, why do you think you're qualified for this job? That's a powerhouse question. Don't forget to include that in addition to having the skill set and talking about your achievement, that is the culture that you find magnetic. They need to know that you're going to fit in. So prepare it. They're going to say, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Which I think is probably the stupidest question that I think can be asked. Hopefully alive. By the way, it's okay to have a sense of humor, just again, balance. But I think you have to make it about the company you're working for. And that's the best piece of advice I can really give you. They're going to say, so tell me about yourself, which is also kind of old school already. But don't talk about your childhood, or that you fell off your two-wheeler when you're 4 and now you really refuse to get on a bike. They don't care. But if you're able to tie it in with the position that you are applying for, like if you're applying for a teaching job, you can say something like, even when I was a kid and we played school, I was always the teacher. It's cute, it's relevant, and you move on. But you got to practice. And by the way, listen to yourself. Do it at home. Listen to yourself. Tape yourself. See if you sound ridiculous. See if you sound creative. Again, this is all about the position that you're applying for. There is not one fits all. It doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. Very, very, very interesting. And as you said earlier, Andrea, every single situation is unique. No one interview is going to look like another, even within the same company.
Right.
And even for the same position, a lot of it is basically based on chemistry and things like that. So we've talked a lot about sort of the how-to of the nuts and bolts within the interview. Is there anything else that our listeners or viewers should know in regards to preparation for and how to conduct yourself within, as well as follow up from an interview? All of those pieces, because, on our calendars, we're approaching the new year, and that means we want to make sure people are being set up for success.
Right.
So any final words of wisdom?
I don't know about words of wisdom, but
everything you say is wisdom.
But a couple of things. When an interview is coming to a close, it can be awkward. You know how sometimes when you're on the phone and you say, be well, goodbye, yeah, whatever, for like 10 minutes before you actually hang the phone up? You have to have a style where you look directly at the person and you say, this has been incredibly interesting. I'm even more excited than I was. Thank you for your time. And it's done. Okay. Then it's the interviewer's turn to either say thank you and end it or keep talking. 9 times out of 10, they will end it. Follow-up is essential. I've known several hiring managers who it may have been a great candidate, but they never received a thank you note, which, there are two ways to look at that. And again, always err on the other side. Definitely send a follow-up note, thanking them for their time, letting them know that you remain very interested for consideration in this position, and also letting them know that you're aware that a hiring process can take time and that it can also be complicated. So I truly do look forward to hearing from you at your earliest opportunity and remain excited. It's got to be upbeat. I'm not cheerleader upbeat, but that you truly believe this is such a good fit for both sides that it's great. Makes sense?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think that brings the energy level that you need to succeed, which is so important, because if you're doing it half-heartedly, it's going to come through. I've always told everybody that I've spoken with, you have to be passionate and, do the research to become passionate about something about it. But people can tell if you're just going through, I applied on Indeed, and well, first of all, probably if you applied on Indeed, you're probably not getting an interview. That's where the networking and everything else that we've talked about comes in. Andrea, you like my bluntness tonight, huh?
I love it.
Yeah. So, yeah, no. So, I mean, ultimately, people can tell if you're passionate, if you've done your research, you come in, you sound prepared, and then hopefully you wow them. You make an impression, and bottom line, you've got to assume that for every position, there's probably a nice bunch of other applicants. So you really have to put on your A game. You really have to put on your A game and just blow them away with, you want that job. You're going to be amazing at that job. You're going to fit into, as you said, Andrea, that culture and everything. So that all happens at the interview. Yes, your resume, your cover letter more specifically, will open the door. But I mean, they're going to judge you real quick, and make sure, I know we covered this in the last conversation, make sure, if you don't have a solid internet connection at home, figure it out, because find somewhere to go, find something to do, because, that's your impression. And while people are very forgiving, ultimately, if they can't talk to you, if they can't hear you because of the connection, you're not going to get the job. As much as they might feel bad for you, you're just not going to get it.
You got it. Like I have my cell phone always when I'm on Zoom. In case everything goes wonky, I will have the appropriate phone number to call, to FaceTime. I'm not saying that you should rely on that, but it's an alternative. You got to jump and show that you think quickly and that you're not going to lose this. You're just not going to lose it. So, hopefully that will not happen, but no one knows. So
true. So true. Well, Andrea, this has been fun. And as you said, we're heading into Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year. So I'm going to wish you, and of course, anybody that's tuned in for any of the, I believe it's been 6 different sessions.
Yes.
Shana Tova, a Happy New Year. And we will resume after the holidays.
Yeah. We have a slew of holidays coming up. So I'm not quite sure what our schedule is going to be, but we'll let you know. And I just hope for everyone who celebrates this holiday that it is one filled with incredible health and happiness, safety, and peace. And I love doing this, Shalom, and I always have fun when we conduct one of these, I guess, informational commercials, infomercials, I should say. So thank you, everyone who took the time to listen. It means a lot.
Absolutely. And just to close, please do reach out to Andrea at the ARC. The ARC has many resources. Visit arcchicago.org. and you can get in touch with the employment department. And Andrea, to reach you, you also do you have your private consulting practice as well. Do you mind sharing your email address as well?
I do. I have a private career coaching business called ADMS Inc. And the email, should you want to get a hold of me, is adms.inc, INK 5 @gmail.com. And for those of you who are facing a struggle on any level, be it financial, be it health, be it mental health challenges, anything that you need, especially food, please call the ARC. We are not seeing clients face to face, but we are communicating through Zoom, and it's been working beautifully. And remember, pride is overrated. And if you need help, please, please, please come to us. Our sense of discretion is beyond strong. Everything is kept private, and we would really like to help you. So Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And definitely check out our past episodes, share it with somebody. And until next time, as Andrea said, be safe, be healthy, and to those celebrating Shana Tova and Happy New Year. Thank you, Andrea.
Bye,
Can't wait
Sean.
to see you next time.